يضيح الله مصباح الله الله the beautiful rose garden that we call the garden of Zikr, the remembrance of God. Now, the first thing you notice about it is there's so many ways to do it. Isn't that wonderful? You know, you can sort of pick and choose, like among beautiful roses in a garden. And Zikr of the tongue, the vocal Zikr. There's the silent Zikr. There's a Zikr of the foot you might be interested in. Sufi dancing, Zikr of the physical, Zikr of the heart, Zikr of the spirit, really with every fiber of one's being, physical, mental, and spiritual, all the dimensions that make us human. The Zikr of the hand, the Zikr of the heart, the Zikr of the blood even. I knew an old Indian Sufi that took his pulse and used that as a rhythm for Zikr. And it's fantastic and wonderful how many multivarious in its approaches to different kind of Zikrs. Let me give you some of the more classical and yet exotic varieties of Zikr before I start to talk about what it is and what it does. So continuing with the theme of its multivarious and multidimensional activities, there is muraqabah. We've seen that. Muraqabah is what I call a kind of eyes closed meditation. One is very quiet, in a very still position, with the eyes closed, and observes, literally, muraqabah, the breath, for instance. And that's exactly 1,000 years ago how it was translated into classical Persian. Khoshdardam, which literally is observing the moment, observing the breath, something like that. And that's quite familiar to people, I think, that in this culture. However, there are plenty of different other sort of modes. There's what I call a sort of an eyes open Zikr, which can be done walking around or hiking like I like to do, or something like that. That's called tafakkur in classical Arabic. Tafakkur is kind of an active contemplation, seeing what's around you, like sight, hearing, touch, smell, the usual outward senses of the physical world, and contemplating those as different manifestations or signs of God. It's kind of what I call active or an eyes open meditation. Many people, when they're training in this kind of active or eyes open meditation, the trainer, the murshid, the one who trains you in this, puts you out in nature, in a natural spot surrounded by the beauties of nature, and asks you to contemplate or remember the names or the different aspects of God, usually called Jamali, in its divine beauty. And that's the way you start in that type of practice. Other types or modes of, these are usually advanced practices, are muhasiba. Muhasiba is another way to do this, to remember God. And it goes like this. usually every 24 hours, but you begin usually in a retreat situation, depends on who's training you. You sit down at the end of the day and you recollect the thoughts, words, and actions of that day. It comes from hisab, which means literally like an account book, you know. You make an account of yourself and what went on during the day. This is a wonderful practice, also advanced usually. And this is what you do when you take account of that day in thoughts, words, and deeds. See, it's kind of like a diary version of Zikr. And what you do is you recollect, it's a win-win situation. You recollect all the things that reflect the divine in your everyday life, thoughts, words, and deeds. And you say usually something like Alhamdulillah, Shukrullah, which is just thank God in plain English. And then in this recollection exercise, you might recollect all the things that didn't reflect, to put it delicately, the divine face of the beloved. And you say, also a formula for that is something like Astaghfirullah, Astaghfirullah al-Azim, or something like that. And in plain English, this means God forgive me, more or less. One takes stock, literally in muhasabah, of one's daily or weekly or monthly activities, something like that. And what happens is, slowly but surely, the remembrance, quote unquote, of the consciousness of God extends into the fabric of one's daily life, if you see what I mean, and isn't just a recollection or an accountant type of situation. This is another way to remember God. It's not for beginners, they say. So it's another way. Other sort of exotic examples of dhikr is called dhikr mustamir or tadhakkur. These are technical terms for exotic or advanced forms of dhikr. And that is a long training, basically. Some of my students are very impatient with me. But if one studies for years, in order to remember one's breath basically 24/7. When you're talking to people or driving or doing other activities, you have to start out very slow and this, and with a pillow and a rug and nice Indian music. But after a while, one trains in tadhakkur to do the remembrance, usually on the breath, using a very complicated system of breathing, in order to remember God, as they say, standing, sitting, and lying down. It means in all situations of life. And that's quite a long training period, and is particularly unusually difficult, I noticed, for most people. But it can be done. It can be done. People are, on the keyboard or doing their daily activities, and yet they're remembering God inside their own heart. And that's called dhikr, or dhikr mustamirun, or tadhakkur. It's called various things. Ya Nabi, Allah, Ya Rasul. Habib, we call yearning, or in the dictionary, aspiration, is really, really hot. It's a kind of burning and yearning. And it's that word that the Sufis specifically chose to describe desire for God. Desire for God. It's really annoying being around these people, by the way, if you're not in love. You know what I mean? It's like, you want some toast? Yes, she loves toast. She's not there, you know what I mean? She loves rye bread with pickled herring. That's an old Arabian recipe, rye bread with pickled herring, by the way. You know what I mean? That's remembrance. The bread, honestly, the bread reminds you of Allah. Tears on my pillow. That's a Sufi song. You know, you couldn't get to sleep at all last night. You know, that burns you. That keeps you awake at night. That occupies your heart. That's a dhikr. A dhikr is to forget about the self, even for a moment, and remember the beloved, because you are in love. I worked in the San Quentin prison for decades. And one thing I noticed is that people go to sleep. They become passionate. You know, the passion wakes up in their heart, and they're raring to go, and they're burning with compassion, and they start all kinds of projects. But slowly, 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 they fall back to sleep. You start out with a lot of steam, and slowly but surely, you start to remember the self, the self, the self, the self, instead of Allah. And that is a very important and I must say necessary place to be in. Believe it or not, it's part of the journey. And to revive or to rekindle that burning desire, just like a teenager in love, is so, so important. To keep that spark, to keep that burning alive, is really most of what these techniques are for. They really are. They're artificial, they're ritualistic and repetitive, I know, but they work. My point is, you have to make this stuff your own. You know what I mean? I can tell you this. You have to make it not only familiar, you have to take it on your own terms. If it's a borrowing and it feels uncomfortable and weird or terroristic or whatever I'm threatening now, you know, just don't do it. That dhikr means dhikr of the beloved. The beloved isn't a priest or a rabbi or an imam. You see what I mean? It can't be that way. It has to be transcendental. It must necessarily transcend all of those formal aspects, or it won't work. You'll just put it in a box and forget about it. And just to sort of summarize, you may feel that rekindling of desire in song. You may feel it in breath. You may feel it in meditation. There's no really wrong or right way to do it. My suggestion is find the one that's right for you. Pursue that one. One thing that I'm absolutely delighted with about particularly this gathering, I think is so important, is that we visit each other in the different practices. The different strands are woven together, and coming out of this knowing that we're all really doing the same thing in different ways is so refreshing, isn't it? It's so refreshing. Rather than saying my group is better than yours or something like that, is that there's something that works for everybody. Sufism has been around for, you know, thousands and thousands of years, and I've met Cambodian Sufis, you know, San Jose, Vietnamese Sufis, and really Chinese Sufis, you know, where it's against the law. And I've met really people that are doing this practice all over the world. But it's so refreshing to know that there's something for everyone in this vast, vast garden of Zikr. Thank you very much. Thank you so much. Ya